The book of Vayikra ends with the terrible tochecha, the curses, or the rebuke, where Hashem says to the Jewish people that if you don't follow my ways, and you don't learn my Torah and keep the mitzvot, terrible things will happen. And he gives a list and a whole category of different punishments that will come upon the Jewish people for their lack of obedience. One of these, the Torah says, is that each man will stumble over one another. They will flee, they will be running from their enemies, and one person will fall over the other as if they're being pursued, even though no one's pursuing them. They'll be in such a terrible state of fear. And the simple explanation of that is that when you're being pursued, or you think you're being pursued, so there can be stampedes. So we've seen many times in the modern era, tragedies that have taken place at sport events, at soccer stadiums, where suddenly there's a rush to get to the exits or onto the field, and there's a stampede, and God forbid people are hurt or killed. The same thing the Torah seems to be saying over here, that in their thought that they're being pursued by the enemy, one Jew will actually stumble over the other, and people will be hurt or, God forbid, killed. But the Talmud has a different take on this. And it says that when the Torah states that one man will stumble over another, what it means is one man will stumble over the sin of another. That when a person commits a sin, not only will he suffer, but his neighbor will also suffer for the fact that he does that sin. Where's the fairness in that? How can God hold a person responsible for the sin of his neighbor? That's not fair. Well, the Talmud explains it, and it says no. That was speaking where you could have rebuked him. You could have said something, but you didn't. You just let it ride. You had a neighbor, and the neighbor's behavior was wanting. It was lacking. And instead of going to the person and saying, you know, you're not behaving properly, you're ripping people off in business, you're dishonest, whatever it is, you just kept quiet and you didn't say anything. Comes along the Torah and says, you will stumble over that person's sin. And here we have one of the most important aspects of Judaism, which is called in the Talmud, and it's a very famous phrase, Hakol Arevim Ze Bazeh. All of the Jewish people are guarantors for one another. I am responsible for my brother. We can't have this attitude, look, I'm fine, my family's fine, that's great. No. What about your neighbor? What about other people in the community? Are they keeping the mitzvot? Are they doing transgressions? And this is your responsibility. And the Talmud puts it this way, that if you live in your house and there's behavior going on in your house that is inappropriate, and you can do something about it and you don't, you are going to be held responsible for the behavior of the people in your house. If you live in a city and you're a person of influence and the behavior in that city is inappropriate and you don't do anything about it, you could be held responsible. And what if you're the type of person who has so much impact and power that you can affect an entire country or an entire world and you don't say anything? You're going to be held responsible because we're all in the same boat. As Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai puts it in the Midrash, he says that the Jewish people are like a whole lot of passengers that are sitting in a particular boat. In a boat, they're crossing the river, they're in the sea. And during the voyage, a man comes and he takes out a saw and he starts to cut a hole under his seat. Well, what will people say? You know what? He's cutting a hole under his seat. That's his business. He can do that. No, they're going to turn to him and say, are you crazy? Why are you cutting a hole under his seat? And if he says, look, it's my seat, I'm doing what I want, they'll say, yes. But if you make a hole in the boat, we're all going to sink. We're all in this boat together. And that's the way that the Jewish people have to view one another. We're all in this together. And when people start to sin and no one says anything, then we're going to trip over their sins. And therefore the attitude of the Torah is we're not an island, we're not individuals. And certainly those who are in positions of power or leadership have to know that there's a time that they have to speak up, even if it makes them unpopular. That's what they have to do. This is a message that we learned from Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses. He was an incredible advocate and a defender of the Jewish people. But he also told them when they had done something wrong. And that is the greatest kindness that you can do to a person. Because if you just allow a person to continue in their negative path, they're just like a locomotive headed for the wall. They're going to be destroyed. They're going to destroy themselves. They're on a path to self-destruction. And therefore you have to turn around and you have to tell them, no, this behavior is inappropriate. You have to do it in the right way and in a way that will be acceptable. But the Torah says that if you don't, one man will stumble and fall over the sin of another. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.